people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
About a certain fight with Claressa Shields. I'm sure you have seen her comments about you've been kind of running from her, you haven't signed your end of the deal. Can you just update people as to why we haven't had an announcement on that fight yet?
There hasn't been no end of the deal. You know, she said I've been in hiding, I haven't dared come out the house. You know, I feel emotionally abused, the thing that she says to me. She got me a nervous wreck, but the thing, what it was, after my last fight, I had surgery, something that couldn't be avoided. I was meant to have it in March, got pushed back, and that's all it is. That's all it was. We were due to fight in July. I'm not going to be 100% for July. I've said that. I would never fight 100%. I need to be 100% to box Claressa. Simple as that. So I'm literally asking for a 4 or 5 week pushback. That's what I'm asking for, back end of August, early September. And she's booting off big style. That's all it is, really. She's had a letter from my surgeon. She's still crying wolf, saying that there's been no surgery. Saying that I'm on the juice and I need more time to get the drugs out of my system. I've accepted a demand to sign up to the VADA programme, no problem. That's it.
So from the sounds of it, Savannah, on your end, it's pretty much everything still agreed. It's just a matter of officially putting pen to paper once you're fully back into camp from the sounds of it.
Yeah, 100%. I want the fight with Claressa. I've got nowhere else to go. She's got the other 3 belts, so that's all it is. It makes you wonder, you know, why can't we push it back to that date?
Do you have a message for her in response to kind of everything she's had to say over social media?
She can say what she wants. I don't even know how to go on social media. I'm prone to a bit of marketplace, but that's about it. But Claressa, the fight will happen. And I cannot wait to leave your face looking like a butcher's block. So I've been waiting a long time.
People were starting to wonder, why no official announcement in association with this fight between Savannah Marshall and Claressa Shields? Both fighters fight under the same promotional banner. They're on the same side of the street, so there should be no obstacles. And now we have more clarity that Savannah Marshall requested more time because she underwent a surgery immediately after the Femke Hermans fight. Which I don't think is a big deal. I don't think that's a lot to ask. You're hearing it from the horse's mouth. You're hearing it from Savannah Marshall herself. You're hearing it from Ben Shalom, who was quoted as saying, hopefully Claressa is going to be sensible and accept that both of them need to be fit and ready.
We're not talking about 4 or 5 months. We're talking about 4 or 5 weeks.
Well, things considered, I don't think that's a lot to ask. They were looking at July for the fight. They want to push it back to either August or early September.
And because no official announcement had been made.
They were looking at July for the fight, but that was tentatively, you understand, subject to change. There's room for it.
There's no fight out there bigger than this fight for Claressa Shields or Savannah Marshall.
I feel like both fighters, in spite of one fighter being a lot more accomplished than the other, respectively, they both need this fight. This is their Moby Dick.
Savannah needs the fight, obviously, but so does Claressa.
Claressa Shields, who is quoted as saying, I don't care when me and Savannah Marshall fighting. She's gonna lose. But sign up for VADA testing now. Hurry up, too. This how it goes when you're talking to Undisputed. Ms. I'm the biggest puncher in women's boxing. Fuck out of here. Amanda Serrano is the biggest puncher in women's boxing, to which Savannah Marshall herself replied, signed up last week. All chush.
I don't know if Amanda Serrano is or isn't the biggest puncher in women's boxing, but I do know it's not Amanda Serrano Claressa's going to be fighting.
She's going to be fighting Savannah Marshall, and Savannah Marshall, respectively, has proven to be a bigger puncher, in fact, than Claressa Shields, and that's what Claressa, young Claressa, needs to focus on.
She's urging Savannah to sign up for VADA testing, which Savannah says she already has.
Savannah feels that what Claressa is trying to imply is that Savannah's on the sauce, that the source of her power might be nefarious in its origins, when not that long ago, Claressa Shields was questioning whether or not Savannah had power at all. Claressa Shields used to say, that the source of Savannah Marshall's power is that she's fighting girls on short notice, not giving them adequate time to prepare. Upon further examination, I don't think that's true. At least I didn't. Hannah Rankin, that fight was planned.
That wasn't a short notice fight, and neither was the Femke Hermans fight.
I don't even think the Lolita Musea fight before it was short notice.
I think Clarissa, in her own way, is coming to terms with the fact that Savannah's a bigger puncher than she is.
She is, in fact, the bigger puncher in the fight, but not just the bigger puncher in the fight, one of the biggest punchers in the entire sport of women's boxing. Nobody knocks him down and knocks him dead the way that Savannah Marshall does.
No, not at these weights.
Savannah Marshall is the single biggest puncher Clarissa Shields will have fought the night both girls go toe-to-toe, set foot in a squared circle, and hash it out. You see,
Clarissa huffs and puffs over everything.
I don't want to accuse her of huffing and puffing for no reason. Certainly, anti-doping testing ahead of the fight is a pretty big deal, and you want to cover all the bases. You do, but this ain't the first time that Clarissa has made a scene or raised a stink.
We're talking about a delay of 5 weeks, not 5 months.
It's almost like Clarissa's being blasé about the fight, trying to be, when this is in fact the biggest fight of her career. It's the biggest fight of Savannah's career, easily, but it's also the biggest fight of Clarissa's career, because this fight will have more eyes on it than the Christina Hammer fight did, than the Ivana Habazin fight did.
And those were all undisputed title fights, but so is this one.
Those fights were undisputed title fights, and so is this one, but this one's going to get a lot more attention than those fights, and this is in fact a more formidable fighter than those fighters were, than either Christina Hammer or Ivana Habazin.
I wouldn't pick either of those fighters to go to distance with Savannah.
I wouldn't. Just being honest. Clarissa Shields beat the both of those fighters comprehensively, decisively. She did, but I wouldn't pick either one of those two girls, either Ivana Habazin or Christina Hammer, to go the distance with Savannah. That's what Clarissa is dealing with. One of the biggest punchers in the entire sport, who just so happens to be a very skilled ambidextrous switch hitter.
You'd have a hell of a hard time getting either one of these two girls to say something nice about the other.
But that is the reality of the situation. This is a far more dangerous fight than a Marie-Eve Dicaire fight. Marie-Eve Dicaire, who's a skilled southpaw, but she's no puncher. Neither was Ivana Habazin. Christina Hammer had a decent right hand, though ultimately she's a limited outside jabber. Fluster.
It's an obviously more dangerous fight than a Nikki Adler fight or a Tori Nelson fight.
I don't think Clarissa would be harping about VADA testing if it weren't. Those are all very good fights with very good fighters, but this fight, unlike those fights, it does have an element of danger that those fights didn't have, and I'm just hoping they get it over the line, because a 5-week delay ain't much to ask when the fight wasn't officially announced anyway.
What's 5 more weeks for one of the biggest fights in the entire sport of women's boxing?
What's 5 more weeks? Shouldn't be a problem. In men's bantamweight news, I'm sure you've heard already that it's official. Naoya Inoue will be taking on Donaire II for the second time. Drama in Saitama 2! Except this time it's going to be 3 of the 4 alphabet titles on the line instead of just 2. As you might recall, the first time these two boys met, it was in the World Boxing Super Series' final.
There were 3 champions that participated in the final.
Ryan Burnett, the then reigning WBA champion, Zolani Tete, the then reigning WBO champion, IBF champion of Puerto Rico, Emmanuel Rodriguez.
There were 3 champions that participated in that season of the World Boxing Super Series.
And most people figured that Naoya Inoue would emerge the victor once the smoke settled.
They did.
Most people figured that Naoya would be the last man standing, but what people didn't figure is that Donaire, who was seen as a fighter who was past his best days, he was seen as a fighter who likely won't win a title again. He managed to beat Ryan Burnett, the now retired Ryan Burnett, former champion, and he made it all the way to the end. Surprised a lot of people with the fight that he put up and he put on against Naoya Inoue. Nobody else has ever made Naoya Inoue look as human as Donaire did. Could he do that for a second time? He's older now than he was then.
Most people forget that when the tournament ended, Zolani Tete had withdrawn from the tournament.
He's there at the start, though not there at the finish. Zolani Tete had suffered an injury, withdrew from the tournament, and he didn't lose his WBO title until sometime later to John Riel Casimiro.
I started to wonder as to whether or not we'd ever see an undisputed champion at this weight.
Because all the titles weren't on the line in the World Boxing Super Series, and with the title having changed hands, WBO title from Zolani Tete to John Riel Casimiro. John Riel Casimiro, who was supposed to be meeting Naoya Inoue in the ring as part of a top-ranked show, a show that was sidetracked and derailed by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. John Riel Casimero, who subsequently ended up on the PBC side of things.
That didn't help the situation.
I mean, a lot of things have happened. It took a lot of doing to get here, to get to this point. In spite of losing to Naoya Inoue in the World Boxing Super Series, Nonito Donaire once again exceeded expectations when he saw himself becoming a champion.
After losing to Inoue, he became a champion again by beating Nordine Bali.
Nordine Bali, the younger unbeaten fighter, unbeaten champion at that time, who was so battered by Nonito Donaire in their WBC bantamweight contest, their WBC bantamweight title fight. That's a big part of how we're here.
How we got here.
And even after that fight, it took some doing. Nonito Donaire was willing to go in there with John Riel Casimero, who was still this division's WBO champion at that time, and do a unification match with him on the PBC side of things. But the John Riel Casimero people, they screwed the pooch. They didn't process their anti-doping paperwork in a timely fashion. They
made some derogatory comments about Nonito Donaire's wife.
Rachel Donaire, his trainer and manager. Essentially what they did was they didn't play their cards right, and they didn't realize that it was an opportunity for them more than it was an opportunity for Nonito. Nonito had options. He wasn't limited to just unifying titles with John Riel Casimero. He could always
revisit Inoue and an Inoue fight.
He could always run it back with that guy. Lock horns with him for a second time. That's a big part of how we got here, how we got to this point. I'm happy to see it because
obviously a lot has happened since then, and we've been all through that.
This still is the biggest and best fight this division has to offer between the two best guys in this division, the two best guys at this weight.
No other fight bigger and better than this fight at bantamweight.
You know, I was really starting to wonder as to whether or not that dream of Naoya Inoue to become this division's undisputed champion, I was really starting to wonder if he'd ever realize that dream, and it seems that there is light.
There's light at the end of the tunnel.
As this division's newly crowned WBO champion, Paul Butler, the United Kingdom, he's eyeing the winner of that fight. He's eyeing the winner of Inoue versus Donaire II.
That's the most sensible and sensible decision for him.
Paul Butler received some unexpected but welcome news. In bed at the time, he was woken by the screams of his girlfriend, who then delighted in telling him that John Riel Casimero had been stripped of his WBO bantamweight belt, his bantamweight title, meaning Butler, for so long linked with Casimero, was now its new owner. He was now the WBO's bantamweight champion. That happened just a little over a week ago, as John Riel Casimero was found in violation of the BBBOC's rules that you can't use a sauna ahead of a fight.
Ahead of what was to be his mandated title defense against his mandatory challenger, Paul Butler.
That was Paul Butler's role in all of this. He was the then reigning WBO champion's mandatory challenger. This fight was supposed to have taken place some time ago, though initially John Riel Casimero pulled out due to some stomach problem he was having. And the WBO, they gave him a second chance. They told him, you can reschedule the fight and hang on to the belt, but no hiccups or setbacks the next time, because if there are,
you're getting stripped.
Fast forward a few weeks, a few months, and, you know, the fight with Paul Butler, it gets rescheduled, and ahead of that fight, John Riel Casimero is found in violation of one of the BBBOC's rules, that you can't use a sauna ahead of a fight.
He's found in violation, and the WBO makes its ruling. They decided to strip him,
thereby elevating Paul Butler from mandatory challenger to full-fledged champion, affording him the opportunity, the option, the luxury, as it were, of unifying titles with the winner of
shooting for undisputed.
Because that's what the fight would be. If he's eyeing the winner of Inoue versus Donaire II, whoever the winner ends up being, they will be in possession of 3 of the 4 alphabet titles at this weight and the coveted Ring Magazine title. Paul Butler now holds the final puzzle piece to the bantamweight puzzle, as it were. And if he shoots for the winner of that fight, it's not just any old fight or any old unification match. It's an undisputed bantamweight title fight.
Things have really worked out for Paul Butler. Not so much for John Riel Casimero.
Fuck him.
It's a tough titty.
It's all worked out in the end, and I used to have serious doubts as to whether or not we'd see an undisputed champion crowned in today's bantamweight division, given that, you know, John Riel Casimero was over there on the PBC side of things, whereas Naoya Inoue, he was over there at top rank. Donaire, he was caught in the middle, caught in the mix of everything.
It wasn't set in stone that he'd fight Inoue for a second time, though I had hoped that he would.
Now he is. He might be 10 years older than Naoya Inoue, but nobody gave Naoya Inoue a run for his money the same way that Nonito Donaire did. Could he do that for a second time? That's what we're going to find out early next month when Drama in Saitama 2 kicks off.
Newly crowned WBO bantamweight champion Paul Butler has his eyes on the winner.
What I like to hear, that is welcome news. Now, because the both of these fighters are ranked on the current Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, with Naoya Inoue coming in at number 3, Nonito Donaire ranked right behind him at number 4. This fight, depending on its outcome, it will have implications. Most people, they are favoring Naoya Inoue to win the fight in more decisive fashion than the first time out. But if by some chance Nonito Donaire pulls the upset, well, things are going to happen. Things are going to change. We know what the rules are. No fighter absent of a world title coming right off a loss is allowed to maintain a rank. Thus, Naoya Inoue would be ejected from the list, and Nonito Donaire would advance and gain ground. It's just a question of how much ground. For those not aware, Nonito Donaire is a 4-division champion. He's been a champion at 4 weights. That's more weights than Terence Crawford.
You gotta think about that.
The one thing Terence Crawford has done in his illustrious career that Nonito hasn't in his is Terence has seen himself become an undisputed champion at least once, whereas in spite of Nonito having campaigned at more weights than Terence and having become a champion at more weights than Terence, he's never done that. He's never become an undisputed champion, though he will come very close to doing so if he pulls the upset, if he beats Naoya Inoue. Most people aren't favoring him to do that, but that's just something to think about, something to consider. In any event, whether Inoue wins or Donaire wins, the loser, they're going to get ejected from the list, and everybody ranked behind them will move up 1 spot.
That's in any event, whether Inoue beats him or he gets beat.
Donaire beats him. Kazuto Ioka, Jermel Charlo, Josh Taylor, Errol Spence Jr., Shakur Stevenson, and Dimitri Bivol. They may all see themselves moving up at least 1 spot once that fight is over, and a vacancy.
There's gonna be a vacant spot.
Question of who will occupy it. Unified Super Bantamweight champion Stefan Fulton, who beat 2 active reigning world champions to see himself crowned as a unified champion at his own weight. He's somebody you want to consider, but you also want to consider Artur Beterbiev, who's supposed to be in action very soon against Joe Smith Jr. in what is a 3-belt unification match. He's already a unified champion.
These guys are in the queue.
And once the outcome of Inoue versus Donaire II is decided, one of them will be up for consideration. One of them could see themselves ranked on this list. If Inoue wins, not much really changes for him. He'll maintain that number 3 spot because, well, in spite of this being a 3-belt unification as opposed to just a 2-belt unification the way it was when he first fought Nonito, he already beat this guy.
So he'll secure that number 3 spot, though he won't gain much ground for it.
It's really if Nonito Donaire pulls the upset that we'll see more dramatic changes to the list, as Inoue will be bumped off, Nonito Donaire will gain considerable ground, and he'll be just 1 fight away from becoming an undisputed champion. All he's got to do is fight Paul Butler and beat him. You do realize he's been a champion at 4 weights, and he's beaten 5 active reigning world champions already. If he beats Naoya Inoue, moves on from that, and beats Paul Butler, he'll have a stronger argument than Terence Crawford to occupy that number 2 spot.
Something you want to think about.